It's March and it's Women's History Month. And of course, it would be inspiring me to do an episode. And please, even if you are not a woman, even if you are a young man or an older man, please stay. There's something here for you. Trust me. Okay. I love this month because I get to see all the very cool things that people are putting up about all of these different women in history and how they've impacted even my life now, right? All that they did, all the ways that they served, their courage, their bravery, their insight, and their beauty, all the ways that they came forward to pave the way and make it easier, a little bit easier for someone like me. I was born in the late 60s, so I came up, Gen Xer came up in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. And I got to say that I was born when I was a little girl. I thought it was a superpower to be born a girl. I really did. It wasn't until I got a little older and started going to school that I realized, oh, wait a minute. What's this all about? What's this sexism and misogyny all about? And of course, I didn't even know those words until I got older, into my 20s. And yet, while there were times where I can say I probably felt a little disheartened by it and maybe even shocked, there was something brazen in me. And perhaps it's genetic because both of my grandmothers on either side, maternal and paternal, these women were not your average or your everyday brand of women. They definitely bucked the norms. And so I think it got passed down. It skipped a generation, although my mom was pretty bold. Uh, I definitely felt when I was younger like I can do anything. It doesn't matter that I was born a girl. And the fact that I knew that I had the capability of someday being a mother and giving birth to children and then taking care of them and help them grow was an incredibly empowering thing when I was much younger. Growing up in the 80s, I think was a great thing to experience because there was a whole new revolution of feminism, but in a different way. The Gen X generation is really the bridge. I call it the bridge generation. We're between old world and the new world. And so we've gotten to see all ends. But going back into the 80s, especially like in music and in literature, women have always been involved in literature. But then to get to see women being more involved in politics, not that I want to get political, all of these things that were coming out, the edginess of music, the roles that were being played by women in theater and in the arts in general, it was a great time, especially to grow up in New York City. Those times were a great time for a girl to be growing up, for a young girl. And I got to tell you that even when I was in my 20s, at no time did I think like, oh, I'm a woman. I didn't throw that word around. You know, to me, the word woman or to be a woman or women was like sacred. I've been given a book by a former boyfriend back in the 90s, and it was a book on all the different stages of being a female. So from the time that you were a young girl and a young maiden to going into young womanhood and then going into full-fledged womanhood and then becoming a matriarch and then the crone. I really valued that book, and I valued that it was given to me by a male because it even solidified even more for me that I didn't want to miss any of the steps, you know. So I got to tell you that I didn't really start to consider myself a woman until my 40s. And this was because in my opinion, a woman is someone that is taking full responsibility of their life, owning it on all the levels, and also owning the mistakes and wanting to repair that or correct the behavior for the future. And that book, reading that book in my early 20s, also helped me realize like there are phases here that I'm going to go through and that I don't have to try and be everything right now because it's not necessary. And again, didn't want to miss any steps. Owning the concept of being a woman, like I said before, started in my 40s. And what it did was it made me very conscious and aware of not wanting to repeat a lot of old mistakes that I was finding myself getting into. And some things were subtle and some things were blatant. And also recognizing what I had done for the first, 30 some odd years of my life, and what did I want the rest of the trajectory to look like. And I think that this applies to everyone, male or female, is that a certain portion of our lives, sometimes people want to rush through the process, right? Like you just want to be famous, or you just want to make a lot of money. And there's just so much important stuff developmentally that happens in the 20s and the 30s that helps inform you as an adult so that you're not going through a midlife crisis, right? When you're in your late 40s and 50s, that you've done a lot of the work to clean up whatever happened in the 20s and 30s so that the rest of your life goes much smoother and that you're on a trajectory of even more growth. And so I can say now that I'm in my 50s, I feel more qualified to talk about things. I had taught for many years to people of all ages in my 20s and 30s, and then took that break. And I was like, I want to come to this from a very authentic place, from a place where it's like, oh, been there, done that, made not all the mistakes that you can make, but made mistakes and have learned how to learn from them and do things differently. And that's an important piece that I think sometimes people think they can just skip over. And I think that it's very much worth going through the process. When I will say it became even more punctuated because I had gotten ill in my early 30s. Even in going through that process, I knew I wasn't trying to rush to the other side of it because the illness itself had very important things to teach me. And I didn't want to miss it because I didn't want to find myself going through that illness again later in life. Because it's harder to recover as you get older. The body doesn't recover as fast. And I would say that emotionally, if you're going through the process of maturation at a nice, steady clip, that you're able to weather blows and things that happen in a much better way. You don't get so thrown off center as you mature. And I can say, as being a woman now, I feel like I'm a full-fledged woman now, that I have so much more to learn. And that I'm constantly looking to people that have walked before me. That's one thing that I had when I was in my 20s and my 30s. I really wanted mentors. I really wanted to look up to people, not like to worship them like idols, but really people that I look up to say, wow, what did they go through? How did they handle it? How does that relate to what I'm going through? Can I apply any of those principles in my life to maybe learn something and get a little wiser? Because wisdom is something that I pray for incessantly these days. I pray for other things as well, but wisdom is one of those things. And wisdom does come over time, and wisdom comes through experience and learning from your mistakes. And so even now, I still look to people, my elders, I like to call them, and most of them are women. Um, I do have male counterpoints that have also been teachers and wise men in my life. But there's for me, this constant drive to learn and to be a perennial student and learning from those that have come before me. And even some people that are possibly younger than me that are doing things that I didn't do when I was that age, or just because they were born in an age where they have, they're more technically savvy or somewhat like that, something like that, that there is something for me to learn there as well. Another thing that I will say that's pretty amazingly humble about being a woman is going through all of the different hormonal changes. Now, males out there, this is still for you because you've probably got females around you and it's good for you to know these things, right? And listen, it's not that women are going crazy, but there's a lot of things that are going on inside of the body, and men have their own menopause. I'm convinced of that. I don't know what it is, and I don't know how it directly affects you, but I believe that it exists. So, for a female, for a woman going through hormonal changes from being a teenager, starting to get your menses, to then becoming a woman, possibly getting pregnant, that's a whole other trip that I didn't get to experience, but I know a ton about it because I worked with so many women that were prenatal and postnatal care. But then you've got a nice stretch where things kind of just like look like, oh, it's good, we're good. And then perimenopause hits. It is one of the most humbling experiences that I've ever had in my life. I thought I had prepared for this. I studied about this extensively in my 20s and 30s, knowing that everything that I did in my 20s and 30s and 40s would have an impact on this process. You know what? There are things that I did not read about that I still experience that knocked me on my butt. And I'm glad that more women are talking about it now because it was talked about. Like, I read a great book called Is It Hot in Here? Is It Just Me? Which was hilarious. I read it in my 20s. One of my clients was reading it and she said, you should read this because you should be informed of what's going on with my body and what's going to go on with your body. And I would be laughing on the subway when I was reading this. So yeah. Is it hot in here? Is it just me? I'll make sure to get the name and put it in the editorial. And even still, with working with women that were perimenopausal, menopausal, injured, ill, even after all of that, I was still humbled and found myself having to learn how to care for myself in a completely different way. And one of the biggest things that I've learned, thank you, perimenopause and now menopause, I'm just recently at the pause, is that no is a complete sentence. And it is very important when you are trying to take care of yourself. Because if you are sleep deprived, nutrient deprived, and exhausted, you're not really of any use to anyone else. So I will say that it's been one of the most humbling experiences, probably even more humbling than when I was ill for a few years back in my 30s, because I knew that I would recover and I knew that I had the strength and the youth and the healthy body to begin with that helped get me through. And also there was a lot that I had to work with here and here. This is different. And this is empowering, this phase of life of being a woman. So I guess I would be at the matriarchal stage ish, not quite. I don't know. But what I do know is that it's an empowering time to be alive. And it is beautiful to watch the younger generation of women that support one another. It was different back in the 60s, 70s, even 80s, because of the misogyny and because it was a predominantly male dominated environment in general in workplaces. And sometimes women would compete with one another to get that male gaze or to get that promotion, or find themselves behaving in ways that were contrary to their own femininity to get what they wanted or to get ahead. Not the case now, which is uplifting. So I love seeing women of different generations, myself included. I have women that I'm very close to that are much older than me. Could be my mother, my grandmother. And also I have women my age and also women that are younger than I. It could be my daughter or a younger sister. And I have younger sisters and older sisters, metaphorically speaking. It's a beautiful thing to see all of us coming together and helping each other grow. And it is something that women have more in their back pockets, and that we tend to easily create community amongst ourselves. in the healthiest of situations and sometimes not so healthy. And I see that the younger male population is doing it too. And they're gaining more access to women in a new way and looking at them in a different way. Because I'm having conversation with males and females out there, and I see this happening. And I think that it's beautiful. And so this world is not just about who runs the world, girls. We need each other, right? Females are not more important than males, and males are not more important than females. We need each other. We need to work together, not just within same sex circles, okay, or gender identification, but in general, the world. We need to work together. You need a sperm and an ovum to make a baby, to make a human. So I'm going to close this little episode by saying, while it is Women's History Month, we must always remember that we need each other, male and female, people in general. And if there's anything to be focusing on at this point, I believe, is that feminine aspect of energy, the nurturance, the nourishing, the mothering, the healing. Males have that energy too. We do need to implement more of that in the world, and it can be done in so many different ways. But the important thing it is that we do it. Wherever we are, that we do it, and that we honor those that have come before us and have showed us the way. So enjoy the rest of Women's History Month. Enjoy being a young woman, a young lady, or a full-fledged woman, mother, whatever it may be, whatever your role is in leadership or just in community or in your home. Love yourself and love those around you. Take good care.